When I started in this role, we were only 15 people in a single office, and that slowly grew, and I didn't necessarily let go of any responsibilities. They just kept piling on, and we got to a point where I wasn't really doing much engineering at all. At the end of the day, I went into engineering to be an engineer, not a manager. So the idea of breaking down into the pods was to share some of the responsibility for the day-to-day running of each project with a view that then allows me to get back into more client-facing, because that is where you can show your stuff and talk to clients, is in meetings and being an active part of a project rather than picking up a phone and just asking a client for more work.
Welcome to Long-Term Thinking for Business Success, a show for and by business owners. Each episode will explore how to beat the odds and create a sustainable business and the life we've dreamt of. Today's guest is Michael Grogan, one of the directors of Birzulis Associates, consulting engineers. Birzulis Associates was established in 1989 by Aldous Birzulis, OAM. Michael joined the firm 25 years ago, which was approximately 10 years after it started. Central to the firm's success is its ability to keep pace with the technical developments and the changing demands of the construction industry. By combining expertise in design with an understanding of economic considerations involved in construction, the company has achieved substantial economies without compromising serviceability or structural potential. Birzulis Associates maintains a high level of communication with their clients and realizes the importance of consultation throughout projects. The team is currently led by the directors, Bruno Fimano, Michael, and his brother Paul Grogan. Their focus is to continually gain substantial connections and further entrench their reputation as sound and practical engineers. Hi, Michael. Welcome to the Long-Term Thinking for Business Success podcast, and thank you for joining us.
G'day, Rick. Thanks for having me. Very excited to talk about Birzulis and our journey.
Great. Well, we might just start at a big picture level. What change does Birzulis Associates want to make? Or to put that another way, what's the vision you're trying to deliver? And who are your ideal customers?
Our business structure as a whole, we have a model that works quite well, and it's allowed the company to grow quite organically. That business model is pretty basic in that we try and deliver quality to our clients. Then in turn, we get repeat business, and that's worked quite well for us. In the past, we've had fairly limited marketing or business development required and relied on producing quality documentation to build the business.
And typically, either what sort of projects do you work on, or who are your ideal customers?
We predominantly work in the education space and aged care. They would make up approximately 75% of our income stream. We quite like that as a client base because it's quite consistent, both from a government funding point of view. There's always monies for schools, hospitals, aged care, and that allows us to maintain a steady flow of work, and then in turn also maintain a steady headcount and retain staff. We have a very low turnover, which also then contributes to producing quality because it allows consistency. In terms of the ideal clients in the school space, the public schools, but then a large portion of it is also private and independent schools. In the aged care space, it's the name aged care providers producing Rack F buildings and ILUs.
Just for the people that aren't in the industry, Rack F and ILUs.
So Rack F's retirement aged care facilities, they're normally a single space bed ensuite, which is then monitored depending on the level of care required by hospital staff. And the ILU is an independent living arrangement where it's a 1-2 bedroom unit that's part of a community with far less medical intervention.
I know that well. My parents are in one of those environments, so I understand that quite well. To go back a little bit in your life, as I said earlier, you've been with the firm for approximately 25 years, and you joined, based on my research, after graduating from a Bachelor of Engineering from Newcastle University in 1999. Can you take us through a little bit of your journey from joining the firm to then becoming a director?
Sure. I find it a little bit amusing in that when I finished university, I was working at the local cinema tearing tickets and spending a large amount of time surfing. I didn't really have much interest in pursuing a career at that time in engineering. I was quite keen after 18 years of education to take a break and do a whole lot of nothing. My father and my thesis supervisor both said, why aren't you applying for a job? Apply for a job. To keep them off my back, I applied for a job at Birzulis Associates just to satisfy them that I'd applied for a job with a view that I wouldn't be successful and buy me a little bit of time. I made the journey to Birzulis Associates for the interview. I didn't really have any ambition to be successful, so I was quite frank and probably cheeky. Mr. Birzulis, he's currently 92. He was 67 at the time when interviewing me. During the course of the interview, asked what my short-term, medium-term, long-term goals were. My short-term goal was find a job. Medium-term was to become a chartered engineer, and long-term was to become a director or have my own business. Aldous responded that the only way you'll become a director is if someone dies or retires. My lack of care whether I got the job or not, my response was that he looked close to both. And I think that has probably set the tone for Aldous and I's relationship over the past 25 years, that it's very open, frank, and we get along and don't take each other too seriously. Not wanting to get the job, I at the time was living in Newcastle, and by the time I got back to Newcastle, a message had been left with one of my flatmates to call him with a job offer. The rest is history. So it's my one application and my one job since graduating. Fast forward from that, I achieved my medium-term goal of becoming chartered after 3 years of working with Birzulis. I was quite fortunate that both Bruno and Aldous entrusted me with some pretty exciting and challenging projects, which allowed me to demonstrate my skill set as an engineer to the satisfaction of Engineers Australia, to then grant me chartered status. Once I obtained that, I did my master's at University of Technology. Once that was complete, I set myself a mission to try and achieve that director status. I tested Aldous quite a lot, as in, what do I need to do to become an associate? What do I need to do to become a director? From there, I quite consciously tried to make contact with and involve myself with people that distribute work. And that was my pathway to win some work and then demonstrate that I could add benefit to the company.
You mentioned you got chartered after 3 years. When did you become associate, and how long have you been a director for?
I started in 1999. I became an associate in 2004. After about 4.5 years, I then was an associate from 2004. And in 2012, I became a director as Aldous began his transition from the managing partner to not retirement, because he still works to this day, but leaving the business from a directorship and shareholding position. So that transition took approximately 3 or 4 years.
When you first interviewed, how big was the firm? How many professional engineers did you have? And then today, what's the size of the firm?
When I started in 1999, there was approximately 12 to 13 staff, and there was only a Sydney office. Now we have a Sydney and Newcastle office. We have 21 staff in the Sydney office and 7 staff in the Newcastle office. The Newcastle office was established approximately 5 years ago and is run by Paul, my brother.
We'll come back and talk a little bit more about how you divvy up responsibilities between the 3 directors, but fundamentally between you and Paul. To finish off this conversation about the business development, was there a strategic reason for opening in Newcastle, or was it more opportunistic?
Again, it was probably just a timing thing that things just worked out. We were doing a large mixed residential development in Newcastle at the time. We also then picked up 5 or 6 schools in the Newcastle area, and we were basically paying a Newcastle consultant to carry out our construction supervision. And there was probably 12 months of construction work that needed to be supervised, essentially. Given the amount of money we were paying the Newcastle consultant and then the projects on board, we made the decision to essentially just give it a crack and thought, worst case, Paul carries out all the construction supervision works for the next 12 months and we'd break even. In the meantime, if he could try and penetrate the market and win some work, then let's see how it goes. It's been quite successful. Newcastle's quite a tough market to break into. Whilst it's a large city, it's still at the same time quite small, especially in the engineering space. that can be quite clicky. Again, our values and vision of trying to deliver quality product in a timely manner and be quite communicative with clients, that's resonated and enabled that business to grow.
I've got some questions later on that look at business development and sales, and we might come back to how Paul has built or grown the Newcastle office. Just to go back to big picture, I find often business owners, we just don't take the time to celebrate wins and achievements. I'm sure after 25 years and the growth you've seen in the business, there's lots of things that have been an achievement for you. So I was just wondering, what's something you're most proud of and why?
As a company, quite proud of the retention that we have and that we don't have a high turnover of staff. That indicates that it is a good place to work and that we also value the work-life balance. We try to basically work 8:30 to 5 each day and resource things accordingly. From a personal engineering perspective, the National Gallery in Canberra was a project that we worked on. It was quite a large project and it was recognised by the Concrete Institute of Australia and it won the national award. That was quite a personal achievement. It was quite early in my career and standing up there getting the award in Perth as a 20-something was pretty cool.
Congratulations. That must have been an amazing feeling. And to walk into that gallery, which is a beautiful gallery, it must give you an amazing sense of achievement and accomplishment.
It is nice to have a landmark building. You can point to something so significant and say that you played a role in it. There are other landmark buildings that we've completed as a firm, like the Ian Thorpe Swimming Complex in Ultimo, a few Harry Seidler buildings around the place. And more recently completed an aquatic centre at Borkham Hills, the Waves Aquatic Centre, which is quite a landmark building for the area. Those moments as a company and for the team are quite nice to have.
I mentioned in my introduction that there are 3 directors of the firm, and obviously you and Paula are 2 of those. Given your role as director and that there are 3 of you, can you outline how you share responsibilities for leading the firm across the 3 of you, and more specifically, what your top priorities are and how you remain focused on them?
In terms of sharing the roles for a company that's not really driven by titles as such, if you were to associate titles, I fulfill the managing director role and I'm responsible for the day-to-day running of the business, whilst Bruno has fallen into the technical director role. Bruno is a University of New South Wales graduate who graduated with the University Medal, which, for those that don't know, is a very prestigious award and normally only afforded to 1, maybe 2, if at all, graduates per year. It's an indication of Bruno's technical abilities. He fulfills that role. Paul in Newcastle, he went there as an associate director, but as the firm has developed and the amount of staff he has on board, he was promoted to director a couple of years ago. And he predominantly manages the Newcastle works and all work that comes in that way. But he's also slowly relieving me of some of my duties, not so much for my benefit, but I think he's also quite eager to learn and understand the other aspects of the business on the money side of things, on the accounting and outgoings and expenditure, and keen to understand that side of the business.
Obviously, it's pretty easy to share the responsibilities of Newcastle office versus the Sydney office. But in terms of future direction and vision and growth and driving the business forward, between the 3 of you, is that finally your responsibility? Do you share responsibility? Do you have any sort of methodologies or processes you follow to really set the agenda and then achieve the future plan for the business?
We do. We currently use a system which I believe you're familiar with, the EOS system, which is an entrepreneurial operating system, which involves various aspects. And one of those aspects is setting goals and our ambitions for the future. As part of that process, we're looking at in a 10-year plan to grow to approximately 40, which is another 13 people from where we are now, which we consider organic, and I don't think that's explosive growth. Again, we're very focused on delivering quality by growing organically. I think that allows that quality to be maintained. The main vision behind that is not to grow Sydney as much, but try and get Newcastle up to 15 people. The logic behind that is we believe that way the 2 offices are quite manageable in size and don't necessarily need a lot of the support staff that once you get too big, one, you need to feed the beast with work, which then becomes a challenge that you not only need to ensure you're winning projects, but then the pressure on making sure you win projects, which either needs to be done by going in with lower fees, or you need to then be very dynamic with your staff numbers, which means hiring and firing and redundancies and things. That's not something that we've really ever done or believe in. We try to maintain a steady workflow and therefore a steady workforce.
Again, thinking back over the last 25 years in the firm, despite all our careful planning we do for our businesses, you've been in the firm for 25 years and you've had reasonably good growth. So I'm sure there's been some level of planning that has gone on, but unexpected things always seem to happen. So when you think back to the 25 years you've been with Birzulis Associates, I'd love to understand, is there something that took you by surprise? And if so, how did you adjust your business strategy to achieve the continual success you've had?
The two major economic significant events that have occurred since I've been here are the GFC in 2008, and then obviously more recently COVID. During the GFC, whilst at that time I was an associate, I probably really wasn't at the coalface of operations at Birzulis Associates. I can't really speak to the impact that had on the business, although during that time the government released a stimulus package through the building education revolution, in which most schools were allocated about $3 million to do some building work. That definitely smoothed over that from a consulting and workload point of view. More recently, COVID, I was at the helm and had to deal with that firsthand. That was pretty scary in the sense, I think we were flying along, we had all of this work. And I think in the space of 2 days, we had approximately 15 projects go on hold, like nearly overnight. Obviously, the news of the pandemic had broken and we didn't really see any effects. Then it just became this domino effect of projects going on hold. So we had to react quite quickly to that. Within the space of a week, we went from full steam to everybody dropping back to 75% workload. We broke into 2 teams, each team working alternate days, but doing 10-hour days. So doing 5 10-hour days in a 2-week cycle, 50 hours of 75, obviously being 2/3 pay essentially. And with the government stimulus, that most people are in a similar position financially, but also working a lot less. The construction industry seemed to be stimulated by the government, and we came out of that quite quickly compared to probably other industries like hospitality and the service industries.
Were there any lessons that you took away from that experience that you've then instigated in the business on a regular basis? Were there things that you adopted now that we've come out the other side of all of that that have become sustainable within the business?
From a point of view of management of people, a lot of people in all industries came back with a different perspective on life and work balance. Whilst we always operated under an ideal that people should have that work-life balance, it has become a lot harder to secure, particularly younger talent would like to work from home 2 or 3 days a week and not come into the office full time. So that's definitely been a challenge for us, because we view engineering as a collaborative environment where draftees, engineers can gather around a drawing and talk to a drawing. Doing it over a computer screen can be challenging. The other big thing is that I believe younger engineers indirectly can learn a lot from overheard conversations in the office, directly and indirectly. And sitting at home, that gets hampered quite a lot. For better or worse, we have a reasonably stringent policy on that everybody works in the office, which can lead to issues in trying to find staff.
I'm sure we have to decide the type of business we want to run, and you'll attract the people that want to be in that environment.
Yeah, that is a way of filtering out the candidates, because if candidate doesn't really share your company values, then long term, they're probably not going to be a good prospect for the business.
Correct. If there's a misalignment of values, it may not raise its head at the beginning, but it will eventually, that's for sure. Just again, thinking back, and obviously Birzulis Associates have had 35 years of sustained success. When you think back over that period, what do you think are 3 things that have most contributed to that success?
3 things, reiterating earlier comments, that I think the attention to the client and being responsive, understanding that construction sites are a live environment and that by responding promptly to requests, that enables everybody to move along and get things built quicker in this day and age. Well, since the beginning of time's money, and by being responsive, that has earned us a good reputation. That's true also for design. We try and work quite collaboratively and respond as quick as possible to enable the greater team to move forward with their designs. Second to that would be our staff. And we've got a really good, stable staff, and having long-term people also means you get that consistency. People get to know each other professionally and personally. And then I think that builds a family sort of environment where people see coming to work as less of a burden, and they're more happy to come to work if there's people that they get along with and it's pleasant. And thirdly, the quality of our documentation. We go to great lengths to try and ensure that our documentation is complete, and the financial success of the project personally or internally with Birzulis somewhat comes second to delivering that quality. We tend not to focus our deliverables around the fee that was submitted, but rather just deliver a quality project, and believe that it's a swings and roundabouts process, that whilst to deliver that quality might mean that the project isn't as profitable or it's a break-even type scenario, that by doing a good job, that will then bring the next project into the office, which in turn gives us another opportunity to turn a profit on the next one, rather than say, we've run out of fees, we're going to stop going to client meetings or minimize our involvement. I think that's unproductive, and it is appreciated and recognized by our clients that we are available and that we do carry it through to completion.
Just on that last point, one of the challenges I've had, and we obviously run a service-based business in marketing, not engineering, but we work with lots of different companies and specifically in engineering industrial space. The challenge I've had with the same sort of attitude, because we've also had that attitude of do the best work we can and focus on quality. When there's a misalignment between our value of quality and going above and beyond, and a client whose focus is much more commercial, much more on the dollar, and their focus is on how do we get this out faster and cheaper. Have you had a similar scenario where you've discovered a misalignment on core values or principles in terms of work ethic and approach to the work you're doing?
For the most part, it's reasonably good. I think that comes to the clients that we have, that we work with in the schools, aged care, and they obviously want our quality products delivered. We had come across that situation, though, particularly in the D&C space, where I guess your client then becomes a builder, where a decision or a design that implement has a direct impact on the cost to physically build the project. Again, for the most part, it isn't an issue. There is an example that springs to mind where I was quite insistent on implementing a particular design. I was all but threatened, saying, no, this is what we've priced, this is what needs to be built. You need to change it or we'll find someone else who'll do it this way. The response to that was do it, because at the end of the day, we're responsible to the end client for a quality product that's going to stand the test of time. On this particular building, it was a school building, and not what was being suggested would have compromised safety, but it definitely would have compromised the quality of the building, which could have had ongoing issues from a serviceability point of view. That dance went around for a couple of weeks where it was threatened change or else. We stuck to our guns and ended up staying on the project and delivering it as we wanted. That's also speaks to the caliber of our firm, that at the end of the day, the ultimate goal is to deliver a quality project to the end user, not necessarily looking after someone's bottom line that falls between you and the client.
Thank you for that. Just to do a bit of a hard left turn, and thank you for the sort of the bigger picture perspective, I'll come back to some of the topics of staff and team longevity. Often is the case, especially in engineering firms, is that many founders and leaders in organization find the hardest part is managing sales. It's often the director's network or referrals that drive the business. How do you approach business development and manage the balancing act between winning and then doing the work?
I was in the fortunate enough position that as I was coming up, Aldous was retiring. The succession planning was that Aldous slowly passed off his clients to me. So I've never really had to worry too much about it. Obviously, there was some organic growth in the business that I brought in, but maybe that we worked for an architect, but in turn, we then got to work with a different builder who then supplies us work based on our performance on that particular project. Now the company's in a different phase of growth. Paul, for instance, up in Newcastle, who needs to obviously focus on business development because he's essentially starting from scratch and we didn't have many contacts up there. Also, we have some of the younger guys coming through in the Sydney office, associate directors. I'm not in a position at the moment where I'm handing off any of my clients. So they're somewhat responsible to try and do that BD side of things. Trying to instill in them that the best way to do it is once you've got a client, latch on, deliver quality, and then that'll organically grow from there. We also use other tools that are now available, Estimate One and Bid Contender. We try and focus our attentions on clients that we're already familiar with or have had some history with in the past. Obviously, you've got to win the work and then execute the work. We operate in small teams and each team is responsible to try and bring in enough work to service their team. But other people within the business bring in more work than they could handle within their own team. So that's distributed amongst the other, what we refer to as pods in our business. I'm not sure that answered your question exactly.
It does. If I could summarize, it sounds like in your pod, you've got plenty of clients that you can continue to work with. And for the junior associates, you're trying to coach them to be proactive in their business development and build out their own network for the generation of work. You've got other directors or people in the business who are bringing in more work that they can handle. You're taking a shared approach to work and passing it to different pods so that we can deliver the work and maintain the business's financial targets. Is that a fair summary?
Yeah, and that is another characteristic of the firm is that it's very much a team mentality. It's fishing for the same boat. It's not, oh, these are all my clients, I'm going to forward them to myself so I can show everybody how much work or revenue I brought in. It's trying to make the company as a whole in both Newcastle and Sydney successful. When the company is successful and everyone shares in that success, it just makes for a much better environment.
And on a personal level, it sounds like you're still actively involved in at least managing client relationships, if not delivering the engineering work on projects as well. So how do you balance between your responsibilities as managing director and obviously the team and the business management sides of that equation versus the managing relationships and or delivering projects for clients?
Probably not as well as I could or should. To be honest, that's where the pod system was born from, with an idea to try and spread out some of the responsibilities. When I started in this role, we were only 15 people in a single office, and that slowly grew, and I didn't necessarily let go of any responsibilities. They just kept piling on, and we got to a point where I wasn't really doing much engineering at all. At the end of the day, I went into engineering to be an engineer, not a manager. So the idea of breaking down into the pods was to share some of the responsibility for the day-to-day running of each project with a view that then allows me to get back into more client facing, because that is where you can show your stuff and talk to clients is in meetings and being an active part of a project rather than picking up a phone and just asking a client for more work. I've never found that overly effective, and I find it far more effective to be in the meetings, and a lot of clients appreciate having a director or a senior person participating in the design because they know we're taking an active interest in the quality of the project and not just throwing the junior in there.
I think that's testament to what is obviously a core value for both you as an individual, but the firm as well, around the quality work and deep relationships with clients. And you value your and senior staff engaging with clients because that ensures the quality and allows you to build those relationships.
That's really important to us as a firm. And I think it's important to clients. I definitely think that's one of the key to our successes, that the directors, associate directors and senior staff are readily available to clients.
Just to do another hard turn, often creating systems and processes is one of the most common answers to why a business has been successful over time. Could you tell us about a system or process that has significantly impacted your success, what the process or system is and what impact it created?
The more recent introductions was the introduction of the pods. And whilst that is obviously only been introduced in the last 6 months, so it doesn't speak to the overall success of the business in 35 years. As a smaller company, did have unofficial pods. Bruno being the technical director, we had younger engineers come under his guidance. He could provide very detailed answers technically to allow them to develop their knowledge, whilst Aldous was a high level sort of guy, and not that he lacked the technical expertise, he probably lacked the patience that Bruno has in abundance to walk a younger staff member through the process and explain to them in great detail. That dynamic actually works quite well. It allowed engineers to pick the person who they wanted to ask the question. If they maybe just were quite sure of the answer and wanted some reassurance, then Aldous was the person that you would approach, because you don't need the detailed response. What you need is just a bit of a nod to say, yep, you're on the right track. That's the right way of thinking. However, if you were really unsure and lacked the confidence or the knowledge, then Bruno was there to allow you to go and lean on and basically get taught from first principles. Whilst we never called them pods back then, there was definitely a similar structure. And the way we structure our pods now, I think is quite successful in that it essentially has a director or an associate director of the helm of each pod, a senior engineer, a more junior engineer, a senior draftsperson, and then a more junior draftsperson. That creates in each pod a varied level of experience in which it allows people to both lean on the person that they need to get the response. At the same time, the pods aren't rigid in that anyone's forbidden from asking anyone else a question.
Are the pods organised in any specialty, by niche, by type of work they're going to do or anything like that, or they're just divvying up as team structure?
It is just really divvying it up. We have 5 pods in total. The only real division is that there's a civil pod and 4 structural pods. We aim to try and give everyone an exposure to all sort of facets of engineering, and that results in well-rounded engineers that can deal with all types of project rather than be pigeonholed into being a PT specialist or reinforced concrete specialist.
Thank you. Just to follow on, you've mentioned this a few times, the longevity of the team. When you think back to the 25 years you've been in there, what do you think is most attributable to the staff's longevity?
It comes down to our hiring practices. By the time we get someone through to an interview, we're largely focused on the type of person and whether they're a good fit for the firm. More so from a personality point of view than a technical aspect. Obviously, that needs to come into it because we're delivering technical projects, but we need people that are going to be a good fit. Someone that, for instance, comes across as highly ambitious and would just climb over everybody and stab them in the back along the way to get to the top would be a terrible fit, even if they were technically brilliant. We have a lot of sort of social functions as a firm. We celebrate Melbourne Cup and at Easter and Christmas parties and other gatherings throughout the year. Hanging out creates a pleasant environment to work in. And I think you wake up not dreading going to work, then that gives you some incentive to stick around.
We hope it does. Just to go a little bit deeper, you mentioned the recruitment process, you try to filter out or identify people who will fit the culture well. Are there any specific techniques in that process you do? Are there specific questions that you discuss? What do you do to try to identify people that fit the culture, not just assume that their answers are the textbook answers that you want to hear?
The interviews are more of a casual conversation, how people communicate during the interview, but even simple questions like, what do you do for fun on the weekend? I find that people that get a little bit enthusiastic about whatever they're doing on the weekend, whether they like reading books or watching movies, playing golf, doing whatever, I think it speaks to them as a person. If they're excited about the weekend, then they're probably outgoing. And I think that covers most of the people that work in our office. The way the interviews are carried and the style that they're carried out in is a very good indication of the type of person at heart.
I find the hardest lesson for me to learn is one that I've had to revisit often a few times. Is there a hard lesson that you've had to learn and possibly relearn, and how has that impacted the business?
My biggest challenge is probably in the recruitment space. Staff is the largest variable. And the lesson learned and where the most challenge is when you're hiring nearly out of desperation, where you're reactive rather than preemptive. That is probably where we've had the least amount of success, whether it be through staff leaving or landing a large project out of the blue where you're quite desperate to hire someone. You then make poor decisions through that desperation. I've found if you're hiring preemptively and you've got more time, you can be more selective and ultimately you end up with a better quality staff member. Far more easy to get more work to fill the resourcing demands than the other way around. When you've got too much work, you then put the staff on, and even though you feel like they're not a fit, they'll do. And inevitably 4 or 5 months down the track, it doesn't work out. They end up leaving, or just culture clash that you could see from day one rears its head. And then you're back in the same spot where you're trying to find another staff member because that staff turns over. From our point of view, trying to have that foresight and understanding the pipeline of work that's coming and trying to get ahead of it from a resourcing point of view, even if it's at a temporary profit penalty by being a little bit staff heavy in the short term. Long term, I think it just results in a much better outcome.
I agree. Just hiring somebody because I think they'll work out and pretending that they will and not. The other side that I struggle with often is when you know someone is not working out, but I try to do everything I can to support them and think they'll get there, rather than just ripping the Band-Aid off and going, no, you're a wrong fit culturally or whatever the reason, and then biting the bullet. Dragging it out, much longer term impact on the team than just dealing with the problem effectively and efficiently at the beginning.
And it's a catch-22 when someone's a good fit personality-wise and socially, but technically they might fall down, and you do your best to try and bring them up to speed, and it drags it out, and it just becomes much harder and probably do more damage to the team as a whole, because if they're dragging the team down, that can put other people's nose out of joint. If they feel that they're carrying them or picking them up, ripping the Band-Aid off is the best solution.
You've mentioned a few times that you're on an EOS journey and you've built out a 10-year plan, and I'm assuming you've got a 3-year target or a 5-year target and then a 1-year target and rocks every quarter. I'm sure you've come to appreciate that a great strategy is really impactful when it's got a fewer things on it. In our experience, typically it's 3, maybe 4 key projects that a business can work on at any time to really be impactful. Can you talk to us about 1 or 2 of your current strategic initiatives and the decision process you use to determine those initiatives?
In addition to weekly catch-ups, we have a quarterly meeting where we set our targets for the next 3 months to achieve our 1-year target. This quarter, we're actually focusing on implementing a marketing plan and a strategy with a view to then engage someone such as yourself to carry that forward for us. We don't really have an idea and haven't put much thought into what we want out of marketing and what we want to achieve. To enable us to brief anybody on what we want, we need to understand what that is. We've set that as our target to get that in place so that we can brief someone adequately to execute it for us. Another thing that we're focused on this quarter is implementing a training plan. Essentially what that'll entail is that each employee would score themselves on various aspects of their particular discipline. Then their pod leader would score themselves. As an example, they might score themselves as a 6 for reinforced concrete design. Their pod leader may agree, with a view that if someone was scoring low or had a particular desire then to upskill in that area, whether there's courses available that we could send them to, or whether or not they should change pods to someone that is an expert in that field so that individual could upskill. Like an example of that is we don't do a lot of PT design. If someone thought that they really lacked that skill, that the next project could go to that pod, provided that there's someone in the pod that knows what they're doing, obviously, that then enables that staff member to upskill in that area. There's 2 high-level targets that we've got for the next 3 months. generally speaking, having a training plan in place is good for everyone. The staff know that they're being supported and that they can get the extra training they need to become a better engineer or better draftsperson without feeling like they're just stuck doing whatever they're doing and nothing provided. I think most people do value upskilling themselves.
It also then goes back all the way to the primary value of the organisation, which is providing quality work for your clients to build long-term relationships. If you're training your daughters effectively, then they're going to bring better quality work to your clients.
Yeah, exactly.
Michael, thank you. That was my final question. Again, thank you for allowing us to dive into your career and Birzulis Associates' journey over the last 35 years and for sharing your experience and lessons. And I really look forward to watching your continued success and hopefully helping you with your marketing.
Thank you. That was good. It wasn't as painful or as exposing as I maybe initially thought.